From the very beginning, Arcane's first season is full of great writing, and outside of the stunning visuals, the thing about the story that immediately struck me the most was the sheer amount of weight, perspective, and empathy put into the characters. This story puts everything it has into ensuring that the audience is intimately familiar with the mindsets of all of its characters from the jump, and then uses that establishment to constantly keep the viewer guessing as to which direction of many possible directions they could go in, with every single potential one feeling in character in some way. It's such a rich character piece that establishes context for its entire cast, and so it's no surprise to see any number of these characters on top of any given fan of the show's character ranking. Personally, I think there's a handful that are great enough to be justifiably called the best character in the series, but out of all of them, my favorite actually seems to be the least popular of the bunch, at least from what I've seen online.
It's not a theory. I saw with my own eyes what magic can do, the lives it could save. You've no idea how beautiful it is.
To me, Jayce Talis represents everything that is wonderful about the character writing in Arcane, deepened and broadened to benefit the story in unsurpassed ways. He informs us about magic and the setting initially. He works as the primary lens into the higher politics of the world. He drifts in and out of himself constantly in pursuit of his dream. He forms one half of one of the most interesting ideological contrasts in the series, and more than anything, he's such a rich, emotional, and human character, one who constantly finds himself straying but never fully forgets who he is, no matter how much weight is placed upon his shoulders, how many difficult decisions are thrust upon him, and how many mistakes he makes. He is extremely flawed, and this leads to the potential for a bona fide corruption arc, but his keen sense of heart and his acute awareness of his dream prevent him from ever becoming fully lost, no matter how far he wanders. We start off with Jayce more or less in the beginning, through a flashback of how magic saved him and his mother's lives. This scene is extremely short, but it's so potent and does everything that it needs to do. Through it, we see exactly why Jayce is the way he is, why he does so much work with magic, and why the prospect of losing his ability to share it with the world had him one step from taking his own life. Funnily enough, I actually stated in my reaction videos on the series that expelling him was as good as killing him, and that ended up being very much the truth.
I move that Jayce be summarily expelled from the academy and remanded to the care of his parents.
Might as well have killed him. Jayce's research here is his entire life early on. Take it away and he feels he is nothing. It is who he is, and he cannot define himself without it due to how deeply he is enamored with the beauty of magic and how beneficial it can be for people. So naturally, he revolves his life around it. It's a pure and well-intended dream, and there's an innocent and admirable charm to how altruistically he is defined by his work and the eventual goal he has of putting it out there. But the difficulties he experiences in sharing his dream and the red tape that makes this sort of research and progress difficult informs us of how this society functions and why he must temper this dream with caution. Heimerdinger opposes harnessing magic because he knows through experience of the destruction it can bring if taken to the extreme and used by the wrong people, and as a foremost member of the council, he has enacted these policies to prevent Piltover from going down this road. Jayce represents the double-edged nature of discovery and scientific innovation. When it comes to these things, there is an idealistic wonder attached to the beauty of it, a goal to progress society and share these wonders with the world for everyone's benefit. But these things can also spiral out of control, and so there is also a danger to discovery if taken too far. And that is obviously represented by Heimerdinger. Restricted and willing to end it all, Jayce's life is saved by Victor, a fellow scientific mind and kindred spirit whose goals are slightly different in complexion, but possessed by the same overall sentiment and intent: helping people, benefiting society. These two, aided by Mel, make a breakthrough in Hextech and kickstart a completely new era in Piltover. And just as these things tend to go, everything exponentially ramps up and Hextech revolutionizes society, leading to differing fortunes for its two founders. Victor fades in prominence from the public eye, his health failing him, his legacy becoming a feeble shadow. And Jayce, the man saved by Victor, is thrust into the light as the spearhead of this revolution. A handsome young genius, Jayce becomes the singular face for an operation that really should have had two. He becomes the public darling, his face on the blimps, his name up in lights, his voice behind the speeches. He is very much the golden boy of this new revolutionary age in every sense, as Alora puts it. Pushed onto the council and guided, or some might say half manipulated by Mel, he opens his perspective, matures, and begins playing the underhanded Game of Thrones that those at the very top in Piltover play, ensuring that he and Hextech are viewed as a monumentally advantageous investment by Piltover's finest. And as this momentum continues, Jayce becomes more and more central as the likes of Victor and Heimerdinger fade in prominence for very different reasons. However, as this all happens, more and more pressure is placed on his shoulders. As he gains more influence and power, he's forced to make desperately difficult decisions, and as certain events force his hand, he begins to lose sight of why he wanted Hextech to grow like this in the first place. His relationships fracture, he does some things that he hates himself for, and he begins entertaining the idea of using Hextech for the opposite type of thing that it was invented for. An idea Victor vehemently opposes and views Jayce's lack of outright refusal for as a sign that he has completely missed the forest for the trees. And the thing is, Jayce knows this.
I'm worried I have to do something I never thought I would.
That self-awareness of him slowly losing himself is one of the most horrifying things about this. Early on, Jayce represents the part of scientific innovation that Heimerdinger advocates, the wonder, the brilliance, the childish wide-eyed beauty. But eventually, he, and Victor for very different reasons, represents the danger of this if taken too far. It's a slippery slope. One decision leads to another, and suddenly he's got stifling blockades set up, he's taking impulsive jabs at the Undercity, his Hextech technology is being used as a weapon, and he's accidentally killed Rennie's innocent child, who only wound up in that position because he had no choice but to perpetuate this in response to the oppression from those above. So many little decisions Jayce makes, the amalgamation of little acts that further isolate Victor, delving into underhanded politics, weaponizing Hextech, establishing iron grips on the borders of the city, ousting Heimerdinger. Everything here provides us with the trajectory of a corruption arc. But if we look deeply into these acts, the intent and thought behind them tells us who Jayce is. The little acts that isolated Victor were done to try and shield Victor from blame and maintain his health. He delved into underhanded political maneuvering because, as Mel said, he had to maintain his status on the council to not become a target and to fund Hextech. He was too naive and had to fix that to survive at the top. He weaponized Hextech, self-aware of the fact that it went against his original sentiments, to try and protect his city from Silco's threat. He established blockades to prevent further attacks and harm to the Hexgates and citizens, and he ousted Heimerdinger because in the wake of Victor's horrible diagnosis, his mentor, while brilliant and legendary, simply could not see things from the perspective of a human with a short lifespan, offered no viable solutions and only spouted rhetoric, and only led to hurdles and headaches for Jayce, stopping his progress and leaving Victor's future hanging by a thread. And he could stomach his progress being stifled, and had been doing so, and he heeded Heimerdinger's advice, until a certain point. But once it started getting in the way of his brother's potential life-saving recovery, there was no way he'd abide by it any longer. There are two aspects to these decisions that are the root of why Jayce is so substantial, human, and well-realized. Firstly, consistent and loyal to his character, the things that caused Jayce to do these things were not the thirst for greater power or dominion over the city or an insatiable ego. Now, of course, some of these led to actions and behaviors from Jayce that were terrible, and I'm not forgiving any of them. But my point is that what makes it so sad is that there was never bad intent. And there was always logic. Every decision he made was rational, and you can see why he did it if you put yourself in his place. What causes Jayce to do this is his heart. He was deliberating on many decisions, and Victor's death sentence is what made him feel the need to take action. And with every choice, there was always going to be negative consequences, and he was tasked with the unfavorable duty of picking the least bad one. Jayce strays, but there is clear rationale for every decision, and that is what makes that trajectory so sobering. But the second thing that helps Jayce's character succeed so thoroughly for me is his constant tendency to not forget himself despite all of this. Throughout, he feels himself drifting, and he consistently corrects himself and returns to the person he believes himself to be. He never forgets those who cared for him in the first place, those who supported him such as Victor and Caitlin, and even if it may seem like it, he never forgets the core of why he began this journey. He is constantly agonizing over these decisions and makes cautious ones when he believes they're right, even in the face of criticism, because he tries to maintain his identity. As I mentioned, because of this, there is true self-awareness in his decisions. But the worst part is, he can't feel the end results immediately. Jayce makes choices that he feels uneasy about in service of what he sees as the overall goals: saving Victor's life, benefiting society, progressing things. But a lot of those decisions seem disloyal to the person he is and the sentiment of his end goal. And he very much knows this, leading to immense internal anguish. He did this in service of a big overall endeavor that he sees as good, but these decisions don't give him immediate gratification whilst making him feel awful. Ousting Heimerdinger doesn't automatically progress society and save Victor. Weaponizing Hextech doesn't automatically lead to a prosperous city. He cannot feel the tangible end result of his actions even though he feels like it was the right thing to do, and that maddens him. He needs validation, proof that what he did was right, but he finds none, and begins spiraling and feeling like he's lost control. This psychological fracture is a big reason, apart from the obvious, that he begins working himself to the bone doing such intense hammer work in the middle of all this chaos during episode 7. Given that his father was a pioneer in the trade, hammerwork makes him feel in touch with his familial roots to ground and center him, as he takes some time to hide from the pressure. And also, this act of creating these tools leads to an immediate end result. Here he can make a hammer and see the hammer right away, a tangible end result of the effort he puts in and the decisions he makes. And this calms him in a way, makes him feel more control by showing him that the actions he produces can lead to genuine end results. But that's not enough to satiate his need to take action here, and he feels an impulsive desire to stop Silco as a natural way to do that. So after some goading, he goes with Vi to disrupt the Shimmer stores. But while Vi knows what doing this means and simply views stopping Silco as worth the collateral damage, Jayce simply didn't realize the potential pain he could cause by infiltrating and destroying these facilities, illustrated and personified very succinctly through his attitude after killing Rennie's son. This cannot be his original path. This cannot be what he was yearning for to become all this time. That is clear. And so Jayce comes to a crossroads. Do I continue along this path and forego my old self? Or do I regress, double back and stop here, remaining true to who I am? Honestly, I felt at this point that the story had been providing us with enough evidence for him to go either way, but personally I was delighted by what he did. Sobered, eyes opened, having just robbed an innocent young boy of his life, Jayce decides that enough is enough. He had been losing control, trying to progress things forward and combat Silco, trying to establish Hextech and save Victor, and none of those things were wrong at all. But if this is what they led to, then he wants no part of it. He takes a stand here, and this is the most authoritative we see him, not influenced by other factors or people, and making this choice purely because he views it as the right thing to do.
You didn't have a choice. He knew what he was signing up for.
We're done here.
And this is essentially what sealed things for me and confirmed Jayce as my favorite character in Season 1. He's far from perfect. He struggles and agonizes. He grieves and has the pressure of the whole world on his shoulders, and it has all the makings of him going dark, becoming corrupted, as I said. And yet, just as he has been doing all this time, he remembers himself before fully losing himself, and he comes back to who he was, to who Jayce Talis is. Of course, even ignoring the widespread ramifications his actions had on the innocent in the Undercity, what he did is unforgivable. He killed a boy, and there is no taking that back. But what can he do with his present situation to prevent further pain and put a stop to this? From this point, he does what he can to change things after witnessing the terror of that trajectory. He experienced Hextech versus Shimmer, he witnessed the plight of those in the Undercity, he realized the tragedy that would result from war, and instead of plunging forward, he decides that enough is enough. This is not his path. Just like Victor, he became too fixated on things removed from why he decided to do this in the first place, too reckless and impulsive. Just like Victor, he lost himself. But the key is, after being forced to confront what their paths were leading to, the two of them both found themselves again.
We lost ourselves, lost our dream. In the pursuit of great, we failed to do good. We have to make it right.
More open-minded, experienced, and wise than he has ever been in his life, though not completely dry around the ears, he meets with his Undercity counterpart in Silco to broker for peace, something he saw as blasphemous a mere episode earlier. And though he tries to play it cool and calm, his desperation to try his best to right his wrongs is made obvious through his sheer fixation on agreeing to this deal between sides. Silco sees right through him in this regard, but what he wasn't ready for was Jayce's unrelenting empathy and desire to see both sides benefited. Born out of a good heart at his core, yes, but stimulated by him witnessing the sheer horrors of a mere preview of what a full-blown conflict would look like.
I am afraid. Today I got a glimpse of what war between us might look like. Your people wouldn't stand a chance. The Council couldn't care less. I'm trying to save you from annihilation.
Along with Victor, Jayce returns to the Council, with greater experience and perspective and with his mind the clearest it's ever been. He knows none of them could ever even begin to understand the Undersiders, and so how could any of them govern them? And he says this, no posturing, no playing, no fronts. At this point, screw Hextech, screw the war, and screw politics. What Jayce and his brother want here is to simply do what is right. And in doing so, he and Victor give up a huge part of their life's work. While Hextech technology is out in the world and cannot be stopped, the Hex core represents a huge leap forward in technology, a huge leap for their life goals, and more than anything, it was a path towards saving Victor. And they agree to destroy it. I could talk, and have talked for ages, about how admirable it was of Victor to propose this, but for Jayce, destroying this meant destroying a huge portion of his life's meaning at this point. Now, of course, like I mentioned, Hexgates are out there and the core was not the be-all and end-all, but you get my meaning. And of course, the pain of giving up Victor paled in comparison to that. At the beginning of the series, losing his research resulted in Jayce trying to kill himself, with nothing else to his life, no extra dimensions. But now there is so much more for him to live for. The people he loves, a vision of a harmonious future, preventing war. So he spurns a huge portion of his life's work, Victor's potential recovery, and what could have been fuel for exponential progress in the way Heimerdinger feared to do the right thing. Jayce's journey throughout Season 1 is a false corruption arc, one that ebbs and flows and lands Jayce right back home, internally conflicted and emotionally captivating the whole way through. At this point, there is no doubt in my mind that Jayce contains the best attributes to be a great leader to spearhead Piltover into this new era of progress and peace. Uncaring about politics, heartfelt as always, broadened in perspective and supported by two brilliant people in Mel, who forsakes the family she loves in service of her heart, and Victor, who forsakes his own life in service of his heart, both of them believing that this is right. And they convince the Council, a remarkable feat. But then, disaster strikes. It was too good to be true, and Heimerdinger's warning about the dangers of Hextech in the wrong hands comes back to bite them in a very literal way. The Hextech gemstone eventually finding its way to a Jinx with no qualms about raining hell upon them is exactly the type of thing that Heimerdinger warned them about. What will happen here? Who will die at the hands of Jinx's shot? Mel? Regardless, whatever ensues here in Season 2 will have gigantic implications, and may force Jayce to take things in another direction. And his smile to Mel before the impact is arguably the most haunting shot in the story for me. He had finally done it, cut through the bullshit, done what he felt was right, made a decision that he fully believed in. But despite how much painstaking effort it took for Jayce to reach a point to make that smile, it was destined to fade from his face the instant it appeared. Many thanks for watching.